Hello, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. I'm your co-host, Seth Boyd.
I am Megan Tierney.
And today we have yet again another guest here to talk about a science fiction film that you have probably seen. We welcome to the show Aaron McCray-Goldsmith.
Hey, y'all. Excited to talk to you about Dune. Maybe not the most sciencey sci-fi story, but something that's relevant to our times. And it's a good place to talk about like those old science fiction stories that were written in the 50s and
yeah,
now relevant today.
Absolutely. So Aaron is a friend of ours. He and I worked together for a while, and Aaron is a physics teacher. And towards the end of this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But Aaron is a sci-fi fan in general and is someone aware of Dune. What was your first thought when you heard about the new one that came out? Were you excited? Were you kind of worried? Because there's a long history of Dune adaptations that I think you're familiar with.
Yeah, no, I mean,
attempted adaptations, I should say.
I was stoked. I mean, honestly, I still haven't seen the original 1984 Dune.
Okay.
But I think we've all just like heard bad things about it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm always excited when way too much money gets thrown at a story. Always happy about that.
Fair enough. And I'm not going to be able to hide this. I think listeners know I'm a Lynch fan. I do actually like the David Lynch version, the 1984. It is certainly flawed. It is not as nearly as coherent as this. And so, yeah, this was definitely mixed feelings because, oh, you know what? I forgot to look up how you pronounce this guy's name. Denis Villeneuve is what I'm going to go with since we're recording. So apologies to French Canadians everywhere. But he's a great director. And so I was certainly excited that someone who's done sci-fi, he did this right after doing Blade Runner 2049. So it's he's done a bigger budget sci-fi and recently. So there is, but the main thing is that he was given a lot more trust and money than David Lynch, who was at the time still most famous for Eraserhead. So it kind of makes sense you didn't give him a lot of money to do Dune. Well, Megan, same question. I know this was in our earlier episode of top picks of movies we watched last year was Dune, and I don't think you were as a self-described sci-fi fan as Aaron or I or other past guests. So
you said it, Seth.
Yeah. what drew you to it, etc.?
That's basically it. Yeah, I was the non-sci-fi fan of our podcast going into it. I kind of knew that. I think that I feel like also sci-fi in these years from what I've learned from Seth and our other guest, Riley was talking about it because they've taken a sci-fi class together, was that modern sci-fi has been a little bit corrupted, I think, like in the industry, namely by like superhero movies, which also get lumped under that category, which is an interesting, and this was a true departure from that. It was for me, it reminded me of a very like I could like easily identify it as not being a sci-fi person as sci-fi. And I thought a very well done sci-fi. I wasn't like even a Star Wars person growing up. It wasn't my franchise. So for me, I was going into it literally completely blind. I had not heard of the book, anything like that. But I don't think I heard of it. And then I heard of the hype of it, though. Of course, I Timothee Chalamet fan and a trailer fan. I always watch trailers, like batch watch trailers that are coming out recently, and this one was certainly floating around for a while and seemed to have quite a bit of buzz. And it was a good trailer, actually.
It was a good trailer,
it drew me in, and I think at the time also it was a bit of a mixed bag because it was also, we were just starting to get back into going into theaters in person for the first time. And this was certainly a very fun and important movie to watch in theaters specifically, which I did. And I'm happy to talk about that in our discussion of it.
I'm glad to hear that because I will admit I was lazy, even though I, again, listeners know I like long movies quite a bit. Some of my favorite movies are flirting with 3 hours, and I've seen them in theaters. I was like 2.5, that sounds too long, even though I watched it and it was great, and then immediately had the thought of I should have saw that in the theater. So and I'm just rewatching it again for this podcast episode, like I should have saw that on big screen. That's really crazy. It's very impressive.
It definitely demands good speakers, that's for sure.
Yes, I do have my speaker set up, so that's true.
Good.
Which is one of the reasons I've been using to justify saving money on a ticket to a theater. Well, very cool. Let's get into Aaron, if you wouldn't mind sharing why your pick, what was some of your initial thoughts on enjoyment of it, and then we can kind of dive into. I think people kind of know what this is in general, but we're going to give a kind of brief plot synopsis and, like we usually talk about, our favorite parts.
Yeah, I mean, so Seth came to me, asked about, what kind of sci-fi film I would be happy talking on. I mean, yeah, sci-fi is, it's either split into, you're a lot more focused on the science part as a plot device. Dune's definitely just like super, super character driven. It's also, I don't know, there's this like wonderful trope of like galactic feudalism that's coming up in a lot of sci-fi, and a lot of the shows that are coming up. Foundation's a big one like that.
Right.
I mean, I think in terms of things that are relevant to our lives and like the political sphere we're in, it's great having stories about limited resources, about warring powers, and just a lot of good scheming in Dune too.
Right.
It's definitely a scheme-filled story.
That's true. And folks, we're going to dive into what Dune is more elaborate in just a second, but if you don't know, I think the general premise can be summarized as, what if oil was cocaine but also mushrooms, and only on one planet? And so we have a world where that's kind of happening, where this thing that is used for travel is also a hallucinogenic drug and only found on one planet. So you have this feudalism thing going on, you have intergalactic stuff, but you also have drugs. So to no surprise, it came out, just doing some brief research, Frank Herbet was a big fan of mushrooms and wrote a lot of this. Frank Herbet being the author of Dune, a lot of this was inspired by almost daily trips on mushrooms. Wow. So maybe one of the more fun guys from the 60s in terms of sci-fi authors. I don't know really know where that puts him next to like Asimov and such.
Academia used to be a lot more fun, that's for sure.
That's true too. I think you hit on something a second ago, Megan, I want to address that. Like, this is, like you said, this certainly felt fresh. This is not a Marvel movie. Even though this is the second big adaptation of a book that came out in '65, and there was a mini series, I think, on Sci-Fi that I have not seen. This is not exactly a new story, but it still felt very refreshing. It still felt like a brush of fett there in terms of a big epic sci-fi that was more thoughtful and I think more fun, to me at least, than that. It just didn't feel like the same type of movie that we get 6 or 7 of a year.
One of the shittier like ads that I got was saying like, oh, it was akin to Star Wars. It says it's the next Star Wars, and I think for sci-fi, like non-people like me, that was a help. Also a very dumbed down version of it.
Right.
But, like, I'm like, okay, like I can kind of correlate, and I think it's just about like, you guys hit the nail on the head. It's like a very grandiose story, Shakespearean, like almost in its nature. And that's a big aspect of the movie that is different from, like it does require a lot of backstory, I guess. And I know that book is like ginormous too.
And I know that there's, just to give you guys like an idea of how big the series is, I think there's been 12 books written since Frank died.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's like not even main series. That's like the kid, like his son and somebody else continue it. So I think he wrote 9 or something, and I don't think it's done. I could be wrong, but
right.
Well, Aaron, would you mind at this point? We should probably dive into like a brief synopsis of this film, if that's all right.
You want plot?
Yeah, I mean, it can get you as things. I mean, if we can take this scene by scene if you'd rather.
Maybe a long episode, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so the basic plot of I guess the beginning of the book Dune, which is what Dune Part 1 covers.
That's a good point. We should say this is not covering the whole movie. Part 2 is coming out.
Yeah.
Which is one of the scary things in seeing it, because they didn't get Part 2 was not greenlit when this thing came out. So there was definitely a long period where it's like, maybe we don't finish this. I don't know.
It's definitely getting greenlit now. Thank goodness. Yeah. So Dune Part 1, it's so there's, that's the craziest thing about Dune, is there is a lot of backstory before all this happens. But the long and short of it is you have, there's like 8 different parts to this. So okay, what's a good place to start? Sorry,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot too much.
No, it's all good. Oh gosh, I should be better at summarizing stuff. That's what I do for a living. I should actually look up what the Emperor is named. My bad.
Well, the good news is the Emperor is going to be played by Christopher Walken in the next part.
I'm so happy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm very excited. Right. But
yeah, a lot of crazy names going on.
Yeah,
me too.
A lot of great names. You know what? I think while you're looking it up, Aaron, let's all go. What's our favorite Dune name?
I need to look up the list. I
feel like you have one, Aaron.
I wanted to be a mentat for this interview. That was my call.
Fair enough. I thought you were gonna just go with Duncan, Idaho, because
Duncan, Idaho.
No, honestly, okay. Out of everyone in the movie, they definitely did Thufir Hawat like the worst. He's like not an important character at all, and he's like
he's pretty important to the. Aaron and I have read the book, and I've seen the Lynch movie, so we're probably not going to be able to just talk about this movie. It's going to be kind of impossible, I think, for me to talk about it without comparing it to other pieces. But yeah, you were absolutely right. I thought that I was kind of disappointed. I'm hopeful for what happens in the next one, because he's a pretty important character in it. But I think are you looking up the name, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can try giving a pretty quick so the story of Dune revolves around Arrakis. It's a little planet out in the boonies, which contains by far and away the most valuable resource in the universe, for a couple reasons. One, because interstellar travel is not possible without it. Apparently the space travel technology they have is faster than light, but still easily destroyed by asteroids. So you literally have to get your pilots hopped up enough to see the future to like navigate space effectively. So that's part one of it. Part two is there is a secret order of women priestesses who also kind of control the galaxy, and they rely on spice for their powers as well. So this super limited resource mined in one place in the galaxy and important to like all trade is at the moment it's assigned to House Harkonnen. They're one of the great houses in this universe. And at the beginning of the movie, you see this like beautiful ceremony of passing this fiefdom of Arrakis off to House Atreides. And the reason for that is House Atreides is probably getting too powerful. The Emperor is a little bit jealous of House Atreides' soldiers. And so this is essentially one big trap to put House Atreides in a very vulnerable position, put them at odds with their longtime rivals, the Harkonnens. And Dune essentially evolves from that.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And I think it's a very, you mentioned Shakespearean Megan, I think that's apt. Like the Duke Leto, who is the main character is Paul, the son of Duke. And he is possibly the Khazrat Haderach, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, who the Bene Gesserit, the priestess order, it's like their expected chosen one. He is also possibly, Lisan Al Gaib, they are also expecting a chosen one who is not necessarily Khazrat Haderach, but so he's a chosen one to multiple people, and this kind of sets this in place. But Duke Leto and all of his men are keenly aware that this is designed for them to fail. This is not, oh, we gave you this rich planet for you to go, enjoy the riches. they are accepting this because they don't really have a choice, and so it's kind of a tragedy from the beginning in that sense, which I enjoyed. Of what you can't tell the Emperor no. There's no way out of this. It's just trying to persevere as long as you can, and hopefully figuring out a sense. But there's no real. They're not foolish doing this, I think, is what I want to make clear. Like, they're not exactly blindsided. They're expecting something to go wrong pretty early on. And there's massive sandworms. We should mention that. It's a pretty important factor of the lore. Is there's massive worms called by the Furman, who are the natives, essentially the makers, right?
Yeah, the makers. There's what's the other one?
They have specific names for them too.
Shai-Hulud.
Shai-Hulud. Wow. Yeah, I thought Shai-Hulud was a specific one. Maybe I'm wrong.
This is the problem. Like we definitely don't have a Dune expert, as we shouldn't, because like experts are super annoying. But
it's like learning another language.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves for not knowing the name of the worm.
I was gonna say, Megan, from your, if you rewatch for this, did you get the impression Shai Hulud was like the worms in general, or a specific one? Because yeah, a lot of the stuff is dense, and when we were talking about this, Aaron, you made the comment, which is correct, that it's not exactly the most well-written book. It's a fun book. It's a fun book to read. It's dense, incredibly. It's about 800 pages, most copies. I mean, like, this is not a book for everyone. This is a book for a sci-fi fan who was like, oh, this is kind of cool. There's feudalism, and like what you said, it's certainly not a hard sci-fi by any means. There is like Frank Herbet was interested in ecology, so there's some thought put into how this planet works that's maybe a little bit more than others, but it's by no means, it's more than Star Wars, let's say that. Yeah, we don't have multiple moons and all that. But I think one of the really cool things about Dune as a series that I was disappointed the movie didn't include, and it might come up, is that there aren't computers in this world. There was like a revolution, I think by the time the first book starts, like 1,000 or more years ago, that destroyed all the robots and all AI. And so these mentats, who are kind of like the counselors, and people in general, are just kind of evolved into a next level of human evolution, where they are supercomputers themselves, basically, or at least some people are. And that's a cool idea that I like, but that's also kind of goes back to the feudalism of why we're still using swords. See, there's technology, but there's again, space travel isn't Star Trek, someone punching in on a computer. It's a man taking a drug and folding time. So that's a cool, unique thing to do, and I think
it's almost like post tech, like post
yeah, it is kind of
world.
That's true, because like they had robots at one point. Yeah. You were gonna say, Aaron, sorry.
No, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you could kind of see it as kitschy, but there's a lot of really cool plot devices that Frank Herbet uses to, like, I mean, I think they're all purpose built to like just focus in on characters, right? You don't have computers, so you, like, every great house has these thinking machine people. You have shields that explode if you shoot them with lasers, so like you have to do sword fighting. You know, you have people with like fantastical powers, and that like inherently draws the focus in on individuals rather than I don't know what else you'd be focusing on.
No, I think you're right. It's not just all the tech. I mean, like I love Star Trek, but like a Star Trek climactic scene is just try doing this with the engines instead. Okay, that worked. You know, it's just people saying gibberish while typing, you know, and it's not exactly as character driven as it could be, where the stakes are real in this one. And like it's also, you mentioned like the comparisons to Star Wars, and like I think those are abundant because, you know, Tatooine keeps coming up among other things, and you do have the sword play, you know, and you have a chosen one, which is like, these aren't unique to Dune either, to have a chosen one in sword fights, but there is a who did it first, who did it better thing. Some of the early sequences are Paul Atreides, who's played by Timothee Chalamet, training with Gurney Halleck, who's played by Josh Brolin, who's great. And like those scenes play very great with like learning a lot about their characters, learning he's not quite the Mentat level, but like he is a special gifted person who is more capable than he should be, but is still making mistakes that a mentor would chew him out for. Like you never have your back to a room. It's like, I can tell your footsteps, you know, stuff like that really I think you really get a great sense of, this is a man whose life is in constant danger as well, and this is a prince who's aware of that, and not just aware of that like a Game of Thrones way, we're going to have a monologue about this, awareness of like he actually does need to defend himself. And I don't think the movie makes it too clear how old he is, but I think in the book he's like 15. Yeah, which, you know, obviously Timothée Chalamet is not, but I mean, Kyle MacLachlan wasn't either in the original, so, but he's a young, boyish figure.
I'm literally just holding my tongue for the Star Wars thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, please. Yeah. I thought it was stupid when
you thought the comparison was stupid?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just like too simplified, and it was like a dummy way to get into the movie, basically. But
it's not a terrible comparison. I mean, it's like, I guess it's more Republic versus Rebellion, which isn't really Dune. Dune's more like Great House versus Great House.
Right.
I mean, they still got all the same things. I mean, it's. I guess Star Wars is less resource driven. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a terrible comparison.
People read in Dune. You know, I think the characters are more interesting, partially because it was like an 800-page book. Characters are more fleshed out, and they have more of a it's a certainly more planned thing. Like it's pretty hard to watch even like the original trilogy of Star Wars and act like this was clearly the planned story. That's why Leia kisses Luke. Like that's not like as much as George Lucas wants to say it was planned, like this man didn't know what he was doing, you know? So you have more consistency within Dune.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Star Wars is just more campy. Is really
that's absolutely true.
That's
you know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we're gonna have like slapstick characters, and there's
Yeah.
less of that in Dune for sure.
Yeah, Dune wasn't written with Flash Gordon in mind, you know. To my mind, I think it was maybe John Carter because of feudalism, but like I don't not quite as campy of references, certainly.
More high camp at least. That
Yeah.
that House Atreides meeting the like imperial delegation, that was super high camp.
That's fair.
It was very like self-serious. I mean, I think Star Wars is too in a way, but Dune felt very like old worldy to me almost. Like it could have been like medieval, I guess, but the feel of it was sci-fi, which actually is very, I hadn't seen that before. So that it's a pretty unique style, I guess.
I think you're right. I think like one of the things that makes Star Wars, like the original movie and first movie, was cool is like this is not a flashy all chrome world. Like the world, like the set design's great in Star Wars, the costume design's great, but it still looks sci-fi. Like Darth Vader's helmet is a samurai helmet, you know. There's some stuff like that that's like kind of, even if it's obvious once you see it, it's maybe not obvious when you first watch it. But like, yeah, I think you're right. Dune in the book and in this adaptation is really good at conjuring up on the production design of this movie is great. The sets, the costuming, everything, I think does really conjure a older Earth thing that we're familiar with in space really well.
Yeah,
which I love. Okay, cool. Aaron, is there a topic you'd like to dive in on?
I want to know where you got the Bene Gesserit as a stand-in for the Catholic Church. I was trying to look that up.
You hadn't heard that before? Or
no, I haven't. No, it sounds interesting though.
Okay, I mean, Megan, you were raised Catholic. Did that occur to you, or?
Can you explain it a little, set this up for me a little bit?
Yeah, and I will say this came to me from my wife Ann, who's also raised Catholic. I mean, like basically in that this is the most powerful religious organization in the world, you know. Not so much that their particular practices are, but like this is a evangelical religious organization. Like, and we find out in this that there's missionaries going out everywhere spreading the word of the Kaiser Haderach who's coming, you know. But basically this is a very, very powerful and maybe morally dubious organization, which I think, you know, by the end of the book at least, you're definitely made to believe the Bene Gesserit are evil. At least that was my takeaway. And I think by the end of Lynch's movie that makes it clear too. It's maybe a little more vague by the end of this, which is part one, but it seemed like commentary on like, well, all right, this is a like you said, Aaron, like a organization that is controlling a lot of things behind the scene. It's kind of you know, we've kind of political on here before, so but I also like, I don't exactly have the receipts with me right now, but the Catholic Church is by no means free of sin. There's quite a lot of atrocities just in Ireland one could look at. I mean, even just like more recently with all the sexual predators in there. But the idea that there is this organization that is everywhere and controlling things from behind the scenes, that is involved in politics and evil, that seemed like potential commentary from Herbert. You know, and at least it's I think it's the reading is there, but it doesn't go much deeper than that, you know. I don't think there's a whole lot of analogous thing, but I just kind of curious if you guys thought he was referencing something else, because I do think this is a very political book in the movie as well, because like the whole idea of there is a one resource that we all need is right for conflict theory, you know, going back to Marx here, it's one specific thing. And this is, they are colonizers, you know, the Harkonnens, I always say Harkonnens are colonizers, the Emperor is colonizers, and now the Atreides are trained to be better colonizers, but they're still colonizers, and that's where some of the conflict initially comes from. So like, this is definitely a story ripe with political commentary, and I will say, I fully understand if somebody just like, I just want to watch my space movie without thinking about that. That's fine. You can just watch your space movie without thinking about that. But we all lived in a world where I think we saw footage of Iraq and Afghanistan on the TV every day. So it's kind of hard for us not to think, at least for me, not to think about how much wars have been fought over oil, you know, more recently. Which I don't know if that was necessarily in Herbert's mind in 65. I could be wrong, but
I think it's broadly agreed that he was writing this about oil.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so
Arrakis always kind of got to me. Like, it was a little too close. Like a
right,
little too
it's
close.
a desert planet, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't remember if this comes up in Lynch's version or when it comes up in the book, but it comes up pretty quick. And I'm trying to remember the name of the character. It's Liat Keynes. They mentioned that like this place could have been a paradise. They were like terraforming it, or they were working on allocating water, everything, and it could have been like easily more habitable place, but then they found out what the spice can do, and all of that went to a halt. So I think that's another great, it raises that question, like, well, is it better that we can travel if this world is desolate?
Yeah. I think like the imagery tracks and maybe like the imagery and symbolism, I guess, tracks in terms of if it were a religious, specifically Catholic comparison, I guess, especially with those. I'm gonna butcher all the characters.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry,
that's
but that group of
these
women,
aren't real people's names, so I don't feel too bad about it.
I couldn't quite get the lore, but like all those that group of women that
the
hold
Bene
the power
Gesserit, I think, or at least we can call them something like that. Yeah.
And they wore like literally kind of like a habit, attire or something like that. So that tracks to me also. And then there was something to it. You guys said it about, well, if we're going even with that, like the resource then could be like ultimately salvation, if they wanted it, if you wanted to make that comparison. So like, I think that sci-fi tends to do that a lot. Like people say all the time, Star Wars is a metaphor for religion and like Christianity specifically, good versus bad, like stuff like that. And the Force is something like that. I actually had a really interesting class say that it's more related to like Taoism, so like more like Eastern religions. Star Wars is kind of more like that, but
I could see that. The idea there's an energy in the world or whatever.
But I think I agree with you, Seth. Like this one feels very wrapped in a bit of like Americanism, just in terms of like war-ridden, hierarchical also, and that's just like it's hard to get away from that basically in our sci-fi realm.
Yes, I agreed. And I'm trying to remember, I think this is more clear in the book because like there's the very intense scene of the Gom Jabbar where the mother, I'm trying to remember her name, this kind of leader of the Bene Gesserit comes to meet Paul and has him put his hand in the box, and basically it's just unrelenting pain while his hand is in there. And it's a test, and this is like a really shitty test to do to especially a 15-year-old, but nothing to explain, but everybody has to drop everything when this happens. And as she's leaving, she says to Lady Jessica, which it's interesting, by the way, Lady Jessica is not married to Duke Leto. She's a concubine, and she really acts as queen. And I'm gonna be honest, with the life of me, I can't remember what. I think the strategic advantage to that was like maybe the Duke would need to actually marry somebody for like marrying someone in a house or something. But she really is effectively queen, but doesn't have the title. And that's an interesting thing that comes up in that, because that just feels a little more challenging in a book. You know, you're reading something that has kings and queens, you're expecting the woman to be the queen. So I like that detail. But she the mother of the Bene Gesserit, where the fuck she's called, says to Lady Jessica, like, you insist on having a son instead of a daughter. I cannot remember, maybe you do, Aaron, but like I don't think that's just a random line. I think actually in this universe she has some control over that. But like the Duke wanted a son, right?
Yeah, the Bene Gesserit are like also out of the million things that the Bene Gesserit do, they're also involved in like a millennium long like breeding program. Yeah, I mean a lot of houses get assigned Bene Gesserit women as like truth sayers, essentially, like someone who can, you know, help your house leader like make decisions and figure out if people are lying or not. But yeah, the original plan was Lady Jessica was supposed to have a daughter, and then that daughter was supposed to marry someone from House Harkonnen, and then like that was going to be the Kwisatz Haderach. But
perfect pronunciation.
But you know, we're gonna have so many different pronunciations.
I feel a lot better about how I pronounce the director's name. So
no, but I guess Lady Jessica just like took it into her own hands to have a son. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one problem with that I saw with Dune is like there are all these like really deep behind the scenes things happening with characters, and they just don't spend enough time on it. Which I mean is definitely a stylistic choice. It makes the movie a lot more mysterious, but like I don't know. I mean, I feel like it makes it look like Duke Leto is kind of dumb. Like, if you're not talking about him kind of foreseeing that this Arrakis thing is probably not going to go down well, he has this one line of like, yeah, we're going to harness desert power, which is like him basically saying he's going to figure out the best way to like control spice in the universe. Like that's like a big, broad, long-term move. It gets distilled down into a single line, and it is what it is.
We should say it's Oscar Isaac who plays Duke Leto, who's great and maybe has never been more handsome. But Megan, you and I have to talk about that, right? Also, another like, I don't think this is in the book, but it seems to be implying that the Atreides are Spanish, or as descendants of Spanish, because like there's like the bull and the matador thing you see a couple of times.
I think so. I didn't even look that up. I think definitely I know the bullfighting lore. I don't think
it's like a hawk or something is their emblem, but interesting choice. I mean, I think that's another thing that I like about it is there are references to Earth. Like Gurney Halleck is often quoting the Bible. He's quoting like Deuteronomy and things, which that always works for me. A guy who has as great of a voice as Josh Brolin, just to drop a hat quoting something ancient, that's gonna work for me really well. But I also love Josh Brolin.
Aaron, you brought up a great point, because Seth mentioned that like this version he thinks is a lot more like condensed or easily digestible, I guess, as its own autonomous movie. So how did you guys feel about like how they did it this time? I guess, had you seen the original, Aaron? I think you
haven't seen the original. I mean, I have a feeling like Dune's one of those stories you either just have to do all the lore, or you just gotta say whatever, we're gonna make it look pretty.
Sure. And like the Dune, the original, like famously David Lynch did not get final cut. They were trying to release like a reasonably length movie, like a 2-hour movie. He did not get as long as Denis did, and he didn't get 2 movies. So there's actually talk about him revisiting it, which he's refused for years. He might actually revisit a new edit, but like it's a movie that I watched, was like, that was crazy, I don't understand what happened. Then I read the book, then I watched and I liked it. So I like the Lynch version, having read the book and knowing what's happening, because I don't think one could just watch the movie and understand. Like I think you maybe watch this movie and get an idea of what's going on in the Lynch movie, but like you can't just watch that movie. And like my aunt was telling me she went to see it in theaters when it came out, and it came with like a guide. Like when you went to go see it in the movie theater, you had like a appendix, you had like a glossary, you had a map. And so
that's kind of cool.
Which is really cool. And it's like, I wish you would have saved it. But it's like, and as she tells it at one point, like the screen, there's a screen malfunction in the middle of the movie. And someone said, what's happening? She turned around to the rest of the theater to explain what was happening. So that audience enjoyed it because they had one reader there. So that speaks to shout out to Aunt Sharon. Hope you're doing well. She doesn't listen, I don't think. But that speaks to like what you need to watch that movie, which is, nobody's, I mean, it's the production company's fault, but so I will say there were some interesting choices made with this one that I don't think were bad, but they were surprising, with the Mentat thing. And like Sting is famously in the Lynch version, and his character is not in this movie. His character is the brother of the Dave Bautista character. I'm trying to remember that Robin or something.
One of the Harkonnen kids.
And he is supposed to be the more sly, cunning person who the Baron Harkonnen actually is counting on coming through, not his brick shithouse brother. So I don't think they've cast him yet. I'm excited to see who plays him in the next movie. But he's more of a mentally challenging opponent for Paul.
Yeah, that makes sense. I that's kind of how I felt going into it. It was like, it was digestible enough for me, for someone who hadn't known anything about it at all, or like seen the movie, heard of the book or anything like that. But it was a little challenging, and I feel like quite a feat for them to like shove everything into this autonomous movie. But I thought it was successful, like ultimately. So that's kind of exciting. Like that's pretty good to me, especially with like the lore that we're talking about is so massive. So
and Megan,
I was like, there's props.
I know on the note of props, production design and such is always a major component of your enjoyment of the movie. How did you, and Aaron, I think you also enjoy a good set design and such. So how did you two feel about the look of this movie?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I loved it. I think the reason that I appreciated going in theater so much too was the like sound design actually this time was really, really important. I'm glad you like set up your speaker sets. I think it's like really required for this.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it was visually great. I think it just like showed like desert very well. I mean, that sounds a little reductive of what it is basically, but like it was otherworldly while also being like believable and like in our realm somehow. So that actually helped connect it to me back to what we were saying about like it's connected to like oil and stuff like that, and like it helps with the symbolization of it, I guess.
Right.
So I loved it, of course. That was really well done.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, did they totally Mexico filter it though?
Oh
Ooh,
yeah.
Oh, that's a good question.
Kind of Mexico filtered it.
Tulum.
You know,
yeah.
Aaron,
Maybe,
I don't
maybe
think we've talked
one
about
kind
skin
of
filter on this podcast. Would you mind giving a quick explanation? Because we should dive into this, which I would say is a thing this director has done before. Didn't even
I don't know if this is the official name for the trope. Yeah, the Mexican
it's the uncomplimentary, but I think accurate.
Yeah.
It's like whenever I think like Breaking Bad's pretty guilty of this. You know, a couple of shows where it's like, you know, you go like south of the border, you go somewhere exotic and like maybe hotter, and just like everything's filmed in like orange yellow. Just sort of that give whatever vibe that's supposed to give off. I think,
which, you know, God, you think about Blade Runner 2049, the color palette's mostly orange yellow. Not even like on screen, just in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I mean, in Dune's case, it's probably kind of acceptable. I mean, they're like this awful desert. I can see it from a thematic design standpoint, but yeah, you know, we might have a touch of that.
I think that's a good point, and I was gonna reference like a movie that this guy did, Denis Villeneuve, which I expected to like, and I thought was not nearly as intelligent as a lot of people thought it was. Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal. I assume this movie took place in Mexico because the entire movie is shot in this filter. It was shot in like Toronto, and they never say where it is. It's like, am I supposed to just think this is Mexico? And like, there's a few Mexican actors in it as such. Like, I think I'm just supposed to think this movie's in Mexico. This is really weird, you know. And I will say I've not heard anything concerning about him as a director. So I don't want to say he's like
that's good
racist piece of shit who does this, you know, but at the same time, and Megan, you and I are very happy to dunk on a racist piece of shit like we did with that asshole from Drive. But so I don't think it's I think it's definitely worth raising though, because you're right. But like, I just wanted to say, for anyone who's concerned about the director's work, I don't think this is an ongoing problem, and I don't think there's a problematic thing about him. But yeah, he certainly has done this before, and it's exactly what we're talking about. Like, now we're in an exotic place, so everything's got an orange filter on it. This desert looks beautiful. I think the shot that like was stunning to me the first time I saw it and really stood out to me again is like when they're entering the space near Arrakis, when they come out of that like giant horned thing. Like that still looked cool as hell. And I think more than any other shot, that's the ones like I want to see that on the big screen.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Seth. Yeah, all the like tech elements, because they were a little like reduced, I think, in this movie and this franchise, like, it looks really good actually, and I think that it is mixed in really well with swords and stuff like that, and like things look old yet you can tell it's in the future, so that was a pretty like unique element for me of it. It looks like high tech too, like the whole thing looks high tech somehow, but it's like I said, it's like it's just not Star Wars. It's not set in space, like it's it's not set on a spaceship, so that's really cool.
Right. I think they show the inside of a spaceship in the whole movie, actually.
No.
I think you're right.
No, and there's no like flying scenes or
like
that's kind of look way more like military. Sorry, Aaron, but yeah, they look almost like a hangar or like a something like that. So,
I mean, I do like that one. Every different house has its own kind of spaceship. Like that's
cool.
I love that. Like, why not?
Sure.
Like every house has its own like personality and spaceship. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a cool choice that like, I mean, it means that all of their sets were like either on their own home planets or on Dune for the most part. I mean, I think it also means that they could, you know, focus more on like just individualizing the aesthetic for each like house's spaceship than like having to spend all this time and energy like focusing on a big old set for houses going from planet to planet.
What'd you think of like the copter thing design? I don't remember what it's called, but like
I'm,
kind of like a dragonfly shape.
I'm down with
Oh,
copters.
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
like they're cool.
I liked it.
Yeah, it is very biological. Like all the
Yeah.
all the things they had going on in Arrakis, where they have those big like
Yes, that's a good one.
lifter balloons. Those were I don't know if I agree with the lifter balloons, but take it in stride. I'm guessing there's some sort of like biological allegory to the thopter things. I'm not exactly sure.
I mean, did it look like a damselfly or a dragonfly or something with like the wing
Oh,
movement?
definitely dragonfly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got that too.
But I
mean,
thought that's what it was conjuring or meant to imply.
I think also like environmentalism is a part of the movie too, kind of
Sure.
pretty subtly, but then, well, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of subtle because it's more so about, I think, their political struggles actually, or like their ruling struggles. But I think the tinge that we were talking about was like environmentalism, talking about it and talking about like how dry everything is, that it's biological. I like you use that word, Aaron. That was a good like choice, because I think that's what helps like create a distinct feel for it too, is that it's biological tech mixed in with it too, which is pretty cool and unique.
No, that's a good point, Megan, because like the story, I mean, a planet being exploited for a resource is inherently environmental, but I think you're right. One of the interesting things about it too is it's not like anybody alive remembers what Arrakis could look like. This is a desert. It's going to continue to be a desert, and the people are being exploited, which is something Javier Bardem, who plays Stilgar, makes a good point of. It's like the last people came here are exploiting us. You're exploiting us. This is not really that different of a transaction for me. I really like him in this role, but I think you're right that like environmentalism is definitely of this, but it's not maybe the main thing because there's so many other things going on. I want to get into some of the things that I saw, some reviews of this that were, I thought, unfair criticisms, especially because the story wasn't done yet. Among the people saying like, oh, there's not enough screen time for women like Zendaya. Understand, I mean, I think Lady Jessica's played well by Jessica Ferguson. I think you have been a guest right, and there's going to be more in the movie, and there's a lot of other female characters coming up. But yeah, Shawnee is a major character. She is barely in this because this movie ends about roughly the halfway mark, which is around when they meet. So I'm not saying that's it's not an invalid criticism to say we should have more women talking. I think that's always true, but it's not like we aren't going to get more of that. A criticism, and Aaron, I know you and I talked about this, that we want to address is this a white savior story? And this is going to be kind of hard to talk about without getting into what the rest of Dune is. But I would say it certainly was written with that in mind, but kind of spoilers for not just Dune the book, but in general, like that vision Paul has of about leading the Furmen in their rage going on other planets, like that's what happens in the books. And Frank Herbet was very open about, he wrote this book to make people question heroes. He doesn't see Paul Atreides as a hero. He does kind of save the day, but then leads a genocide, a holy war. So that's where it goes. So it's like, it certainly is interesting because it plays into the trope, and the Furmen, none of them are light-skinned. We have some Black actors. We have Javier Bardem, who's Spanish and darker skinned. We have Zendaya. We have a few people, but like, I don't think there's anybody who was a Caucasian person. And I don't think the book makes it that clear that they're all darker skinned. So that was kind of an odd thing, maybe, of this making more of an other of their, on one hand, you have more diversity in the cast, in their hand, darker desert people, you know?
Right.
I
But
have mixed feelings on, so like, I guess there's, what is it? It's like exoticism in the Dune movie.
right.
Because I mean, it is a story about like indigenous people getting having to deal with, you know, whatever flavor of like colonizing power is showing up at their doorstep. I mean, I thought they actually did a really fantastic job in terms of casting. I mean, just like incredible Black and brown actors and actresses. Like, okay, and also just my surprise realizing that I think it's Golda Rosheuvel as Shadet Mapes. She was like a pretty small character. It's the woman that Lady Jessica meets, and like she's fighting a knife and then hands us off for Paul to eventually have. But yeah, realize like she's the queen in Netflix's Bridgerton, and just like
I
always just love seeing like actors and actresses in just like a totally different role than like what I'm used to them in. But no, I mean, I thought yeah, the casting was pretty incredible, all things considered. I mean, I think it's kind of obviously intentional that, like, yeah, you have primarily, like, you know, white houses and, you know, taking over Arrakis, which is much more of a indigenous population. And I think, you know, it's a simple allegory to just do that with casting more black and brown actresses for the Fremen. But I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense in context.
I think it does, and I think the intention and I think the effect is accurate, and that, like, you know, if we're going to have an oppressor this story, they're going to be white colonists.
Yeah,
I think that visual is something we should be seeing more of. Like, they're not the good guys, you know, like, because Paul's a fascinating character because he's not really the savior. He's not the hero of the Dune universe.
Yeah.
He's like the hero of the Dune book. But you know, the story,
that's a good way to put it.
which is, I think Timothée Chalamet plays that well because he's kind of aware of this. He is aware that there's a strong possibility he goes down a dark path and doesn't really know if he has a choice between it. You know, I think I've confessed this to you before, Megan. I don't dislike Timothée Chalamet, but I think when he just blew up, when, like, he is just in everything and he's everywhere, it's like, I was like, I kind of don't get it. I think he's a good actor. I don't dislike him. I think the King, actually, which we watched together, was the first time I saw him in a movie.
Really?
And so I was a little, to be honest, I was a little disappointed when he was cast as Paul Atreides, but it's not like I had another dream Paul Atreides ready to go. You know, I think he did a great job, and the more I see him, the more I get it. But I think whenever an actor just goes from being like indie darling to like in everything so fast, it's like, are we gonna have another Chris Pratt in our hands or something?
I think a critique that I had of the movie for me was that it's like, I did feel like it was setting up for, very much so setting up for the second film. And I mean, that is annoying, I guess, in of itself. But for a movie like this, where you kind of know it's going to happen, I'm surprised, Seth, that you said that, like, the second movie didn't get greenlit yet, because that's a little,
I mean, it is now, but it wasn't for like a few months after it was released, which is like,
I mean,
that
that's
was scary,
little, like,
for a few months,
risky.
folks.
That's kind of odd, I feel like, for the filmmakers to, like, make that choice then, if they just didn't know. I mean, I get it, but it's also like, man, I get a little, like, annoyed with it because I know you want things to, like, live on its own, but then I do get it for Dune if it's like this big and this expansive, and that's their goal, I guess. So
I'm kind of hard pressed for another time in a movie where, like, the story did truly depend on a sequel. You know, because even like Batman Begins, you know, sets up the Dark Knight, but that was still a fingers crossed, hope this works, and it did. The Godfather Part 2 was made because Coppola needed the money. He did not want to do it, like, and it wasn't like the story isn't told yet, you know. That's widely considered the best sequel of all time, although I would argue Mad Max Fury Road. But so it's like, this is a really unique one of, like, we did half the book more or less. you know? This is like, we really do need to do the rest.
Well, they left you on a good cliffhanger. You know?
They did.
They did a really good job at that.
I think it's a really important note too, because, like, Paul's a very interesting character, and I think Paul is someone who has, like, 3 dads too, which is the thing to talk about. Like, he's got the Duke, right? He's got Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, who's, this is probably the best Jason Momoa has been in something. I'm always pretty happy to see him, but this is a really good role for him. Like, if you're going to have somebody be beautiful and strong and pure of heart to protect their lord or whatever, Jason Momoa is a pretty good way to go. And that's kind of what the Duncan Idaho character is, while also giving him guff, like, oh, you put on muscle? No, didn't think so. You know, just some roast like that is great. And then, like, Josh Brolin being a little bit more of a hard ass, Gurney Halleck. On this note, the casting's really great in the Lynch version. So, like, I don't really know which one has a better cast, because, like, Gurney Halleck's played by Patrick Stewart in the original, you know, like, you have a lot of weird character actors, Lynch regulars like Dean Stockwell and Brad Dourif, but you also have Max von Sydow, who's like the Swedish actor in most great Bergman movies. You know, you have a really international cast. It's great in this one as well, but which is an odd thing that both those movies got right, was great casting. And, like, oh man, it's Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen here, right? Always good and creepy.
That was practical effects too. That whole suit.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool as hell. He just floated just like that. He just levitated.
I'm still mad they made Thufir Hawat just like the lovable character though. In terms of you talking about like Paul Atreides, like Three Dads, I mean,
Yeah.
they just did him so dirty on that. Like,
Are you hopeful they're going to rectify this in the next one? Him
I'm
having that
not.
umbrella, it was one of the best moments. Him pulling out that umbrella out of nowhere is one of my favorite part of the movie.
Welcome
though.
to Arrakis, young man. Like,
exactly.
like, come on, dude. No, I honestly, I have zero hope that they're gonna do Timothee Chalamet like right in the next movie. I think he's just gonna be out. I don't. Does he die in the?
I think he dies in the original, in the first book, but
yeah.
But Megan, for your edification, like he kind of is able, like he's adopted and like forced to be a mentat, but in doing so is able to play the mind games to Atreides' benefit several times. But also, like if you want to know how weird Dune gets, I think in the latest book, a descendant of Paul has become a sandworm. So
no, I think Paul becomes a sandworm.
Is it Paul? Okay,
that's it's Paul.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so, he also just like is a god and takes a nap for like 1,000 years at one point or something. So, and even though Duncan Idaho we see die in this movie, Duncan Idaho's cloned a few times, and so comes back as like a favorite throughout the series. So I don't know if I'd want to watch all the movies or read all the books, but if there was like something that would have like the budget of a Star Trek show in the 90s doing it, I'd put you up for that. So just like that pacing would be up my alley for the entire Dune series.
I don't think they should make a movie beyond the Dune book. Honestly.
I mean, you're probably right.
Just leave it for the crazy people to like go deeper into Dune.
Like,
I was like, when you guys talked about the drug-induced like mushroom fantasy of it all, I was like, I'm not really seeing it with this first movie, but now that you talked about where it goes, I get it now. That makes sense.
They definitely don't play up the spice in this movie, though. I think in the David Lynch version, they got like they got your little like your little like with the little like
the water of life scene happens and stuff. So like, I think you would like it, Aaron. I'd be kind of curious to hear your thoughts on it.
I do need to watch it. I definitely do need to watch it.
Because I will say, as beautiful as this movie is, the 2021 version, it's a little monochromatic. You know, it's a lot of grays and blacks and such. And so the Lynch version is a Lynch movie. So it's a little bit more of an explosion of visuals. I mean, it's a little bit more body horror. It's a little bit.
They actually have like character dialogue in the.
They do. Yeah. Like, that's true too.
Not a lot of that in Dune Part 1, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Kai McLachlan's a great Paul too. So.
Yeah.
I was hearing praise for this Dune as being almost like minimalistic in its design, which is interesting.
It certainly is comparatively, And I think a really different thing too is that Everett McGill is the actor who plays Stilgar in the Lynch version, who is also like a Lynch regular. He's in Twin Peaks, and this is a guy from Florida. Okay. This is a white guy from Florida with a beard, and so like you kind of, I'm not saying it's better, but you kind of don't have this noble savage thing. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to describe anybody that I'm referencing the trope, noble savage. Like you can kind of have that for the Furman in Vigneur's movie. You don't really have that in Lynch's movie because everybody's white. And so that's not necessarily better, because at the same time, you're not promoting actors of other color. But at the same time, it makes it a little bit more, these are just other guys who are here. You know, these aren't these ancient people with this untapped wisdom. And I think that's something that Dune has always been kind of debated. On one hand, it's because like Frank Herbet was a white guy from Washington or Oregon, I remember which. And on one hand, he is writing about other cultures in a way that most sci-fi writers weren't. Like a critique for Asimov and Heinlein is their aliens were always Americans, you know, but Herbert's Furman were maybe Middle Eastern, but also an American's version of a Middle Eastern, you know? So it's like exotic, but is it accurate, you know? So it's
also like 1950s version as well. I mean,
exactly. Certainly
our neighbors nowadays,
right? So it's a mixed bag, and I know we've talked about this before in the podcast, Megan, that like when we were talking about like 30s movies, of like I enjoy that. I can go in and get what's good, but like there is some things that you need to have an expectation of. This was made a while ago. This isn't going to be PC by today's standards, but there's still probably going to be some nuggets in there worth getting. and Dune kind of as a whole is that. So there's different ways to go with it. Okay, we're going to talk about the soundtrack a little bit, guys. So Hans Zimmer did the soundtrack for this, and actually, I don't know if you two know this, Hans Zimmer, who's worked a lot with Nolan recently, turned down Tenet to do this movie because he loved Dune as a book. So, which was probably the right call in multiple ways, because I don't know if you saw Tenet, but yikes. But and I don't think Hans Zimmer could have saved it. I knew I can get you with that one, Aaron.
That's good. Robert Patterson just needed to put on the French accent again. That's what
that's true. I like Tenet is at its best when it's just a buddy movie with like John David Washington and Robert Pattinson. Honestly, that's fun, but like try to explain Tenet, and then a dear friend of mine said they liked it when they watched it, then they just like tried to explain it to somebody and just got increasingly mad and just like straight like fuck Nolan. Like this wasn't a good movie actually. Like it wasn't a movie you just feel. You know? This was like there's a lot of action scenes. I don't know what happened. But yeah, how do we feel about the Hans Zimmer score here?
I loved it. Of course, I think it really contributed to it for me. That's basically it. That's my take on it. But I'll take it. Love Hans Zimmer a lot, and it helped with expansiveness of the world of it all, which sounded so good. Really liked it.
Yeah, I mean we've all been a fan of Hans Zimmer ever since he did the Cool Running soundtrack. No, I mean, I think, it definitely added to like the grandiose, maybe the Shakespearean, like,
right.
Love that.
Of Dune. I don't know. Yeah, there's just nothing better than like an orchestra as like a starship land. You know, that's just.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I don't know who did that first. I'm guessing that was probably Star Wars first, but like, that's never gonna die. That's never gonna die.
Right. I don't know why I didn't think you were gonna reference Cool Runnings, Aaron. But
I always gotta drop Cool Runnings.
Yeah. He did Rain Man too. Did you know that?
He did everything, man. Like
he's been around way longer than I realized.
Oh.
He's actually like he's an inspiring person to think about as like as much as Megan, we've talked about auteur theory here. So many people in Hollywood, and even directors, are craftsmen, you know, first and foremost. And like Hans Zimmer did a lot of jobs, you know, before doing what he's more famous for and Oscar nominated for. Like he did Lion King. You know, and he's done quite a few things that are not always remembered, and like they don't sound the same, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I think now we maybe have what a Hans Zimmer movie sounds like because he's done like 8 Nolan movies, you know.
Yeah.
And we have an expectation for those two working together, and that's fine, but that's not the full scope of his work.
I mean, I think the soundtrack design definitely sounded a little Nolan-y on this one, like
sure.
It is still a sci-fi, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's over a little over the top, but like I guess my one complaint, so I kind of wish they didn't just use like made up language for the soundtrack, which is unfortunately what they do.
That's a good point.
I mean, like the Dune language is kind of like made up Arabic, but at the same time, you just go for it.
Well, I was surprised. I watched this movie with subtitles on yesterday, and like Dr. Yue, when he says something to Paul, he's speaking Mandarin. And that certainly is something I would not have picked up on. But yeah, there's a lot of this that is kind of like a version of Arabic that is, I think it's like Chabasca or something, that is not created by Frank Herbet, but is also not really an official language. That at least is like what some of the Fremen are speaking in this movie. But I think that's a good point of like what he did Gladiator, didn't he, Hans Zimmer?
That sounds
I think
right.
so.
I want to double check that real quick. But Hans Zimmer has a lot of women's singing, and like I don't know if this is gibberish or a language.
Yeah.
You know, and it sounds beautiful, but like I think you're right. It's like, you know, I don't know, just sing Latin at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm glad you said it. I mean, for me, that was like the whole movie, or just their language in general. I'm like, it was hard. I kind of regret I need to watch it with subtitles almost, because I think it's like, it'll help me out understanding like what's being said, I guess.
Yeah. And like there's a movement, which I didn't realize was Lady Jessica doing actual hand, like American Sign Language to somebody that the captions picked up. So, which is another sci-fi thing of like, that's kind of cool. And that's kind of going back to medieval things of being able to speak not the language, to be able to have spies who speak multiple languages and everything. Because
Yeah.
like so much of sci-fi is Star Trek, Doctor Who, there's a universal translator. And like you said, Aaron, this is by no means hard sci-fi, but it's harder than a lot. It is more thought out than other things.
No, I mean it's definitely like it's a complete universe. It's self-consistent.
Right.
There's nothing where you're like, oh, you just need a tree planet, so here's your tree planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this pretty thoroughly. Bottom line is it's very good. We all enjoyed it. Should we go into recommendations, guys?
Happy to do recommendations.
Sure. Would you mind? So we're going to recommend, I don't think we have a particular thing, maybe a sci-fi movie, but whatever you two want to recommend. So
Sure.
Go ahead. You want to start, Aaron?
Yeah. So another like big galactic universe thing that came out pretty recently is the Foundation series. And
Nice.
that comes from a series by Isaac Asimov. It's not exactly the same, but you get good galactic empire. You got, sort of like long stories and short stories intertwining. And I know the series didn't land perfectly well, but I mean, I absolutely loved it. It was pretty visually great. Yeah, maybe some of the character plot could have been better, but I thought it was just absolutely fantastically done. So if you're into Dune, if you're into that kind of like sci-fi fantasy kind of stuff, Foundation is definitely highly recommended.
I've been excited to see it. Lee Pace is in that, right?
Yeah, Lee Pace is
always love Lee Pace.
all over that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He kind of carries it a little bit,
honestly,
but that's fine.
I mean, if someone's going to carry a show, I'm pretty happy with being Lee Pace. So,
wow.
I remember in the aforementioned sci-fi class, we read the first short story that was the basis for the foundation, you could say, before it was turned into like there's like 18 books or something. But this is cool as hell. This is a really interesting concept that is, for folks who don't know, it involves a lot of history, involves like Dune, thousands of years, and involves a math that can predict the future, essentially. So, right?
That's cool.
All math can predict the future.
Okay,
so,
you know what? Okay,
it's
English major here. So.
It's like sociology math. It's like
sociology math. Yeah, there's like a
will the galactic empire collapse or not kind of thing.
Ooh,
okay,
that's interesting.
Right, it's beyond basic math. So, really showing my liberal arts degree here. Megan, your pick.
Sure. I'm actually glad you mentioned a TV show, Aaron, because I my pick isn't TV, but I was gonna say that like my stint into sci-fi is actually a little more series based. Like I was thinking, for me, like sci-fi goes back to like I'm a big like Twilight Zone fan, which I know is a little bit like a here or there with sci-fi, but then also and like something like Black Mirror is something more akin to like what I would consider sci-fi now. So just a little spiel that like Dune was a good departure for that for me. And kind of with that, I actually did not have another movie recommendation, I guess, of sci-fi, just because I'm so ill-versed in it still, but I'm getting better, folks. But I actually wanted to recommend something that's been on my watch list that I'm hoping like either of you have watched, but I am really excited to watch Arrival, which I heard is a good sci-fi movie as well.
Yeah, Arrival is actually my pick, so yes.
Oh, Seth, we are on the same wavelength, but yes, please talk about it.
Okay, yeah, so great choice. Arrival is really cool, and Arrival is where I first became aware that there was a filmmaker named Denis Villeneuve, whose name I'm not pronouncing correctly, but that was a really great film that came out a few years ago. Amy Adams is the lead, and Jeremy Renner, is that his name? Hawkeye. It's Hawkeye's in it, guys. You know who we're talking about. No, it is Renner. Okay, Jeremy Renner.
Mm-hmm.
You can leave all that in, Megan. Just me stumbling over myself. So it's a movie directed by Denis Villeneuve, who directed this. It's based off a short story by I believe a Chinese author. But the main premise is that out of nowhere, I think 5 or maybe more massive starships land on Earth all over the world, and there doesn't seem to be much of a consistency as to where they landed. Like some are just in the middle of the Indian Ocean, some are in Russia, some are in major metropolises, and one I think is in like middle of nowhere, Montana or Wyoming. And the main 2 characters, Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, are tasked with learning how to communicate with these aliens. And it's a very, very fascinating movie that if anyone saw Contact, I thought that was another like comparable to that of like, this is something written by a scientist. Carl Sagan wrote Contact, written by a scientist about what this might actually look like to try and communicate with an alien. This is a really interesting look at like what language does, and it's Amy Adams is a linguistics professor, and how language affects our brains learning different languages, and I thought that was a really cool element of it. And this is not exactly a linear movie, and that's not clear for a while, so that's a really fun element of it. But it's a really beautifully shot movie that is great, much like this impressive starships, but like you have some great starships and you have some really cool cephaloid alien type of creatures. But other than that, you don't really have a lot of other sci-fi elements. It's more just this engaging story about how are we going to communicate with these massive things that don't seem to speak. And it was really cool. So highly recommend that movie.
I'm so glad you've seen it. So yeah, I heard it was a like English major's dream because it's just about language and like
it is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So as an English major, I have to watch it. It's on my list.
That might be an episode, Megan. We'll have to see about that. But
okay.
Well, folks, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, our good friend here and our guest, Aaron, is a teacher. And if you are in the same country we are, which is America, you know teachers are drastically underfunded. So we're going to let Aaron do a little bit of a plug here. Folks, we need teachers. Teachers have, not to date this episode, but are required to do quite a lot more than they should. And to this day and age, it's a hard job. It's a thankless job. It's a job a lot of people are quitting in droves, but I'm very proud to call Aaron a friend and a guest who is doing this job. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for setting that all up. Not to paint a bleak picture of public education in the States, but a lot of what Seth's saying is right. Being a teacher nowadays is kind of tough, and we're sort of up against rampant privatization of schools. Schools are getting a lot more politicized, and in the States especially, we don't get as good outcomes as we should. So the long and short of it is my one main credential for being the guy talking about Dune on this podcast today is me being a 9th grade physics teacher. So hopefully some of my skills being able to transmit science to young minds has helped me out with talking about big fantastical stories. If you would like to help support a classroom in Deep East Oakland at a Title I school, you can find a link to my classroom's donor choose down in the description. You can find out a little bit more about the school and the students that I have the pleasure of serving, and help me teach some science to kids in a place where kids should be growing up and getting science jobs.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Aaron. We will definitely put that link in the description there. And just thank you for your work, especially in East Oakland in the Bay Area. That's quite a job. So wishing you guys all the best. And yeah, folks, please, if you can, donate as much as you can during this time. Anything I'm sure is welcome, and anything helps. Any little bit helps, I know. So I appreciate that. And we appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been super fun being on. Yeah, I've never been the best writer. I've never been an English teacher, but it's glad to get a little bit of time to talk media and science with you all.
You said physical science was your class?
Physics, 9th grade physics.
Physics. Wow, I never got a physics lesson. Maybe that's why I skipped sci-fi.
A lot of kids don't. That's for sure.
Yeah. My education just said nope. You're not going to learn about how airplanes work or anything like that. So.
I mean, I was homeschooled where I was not allowed to read most of the science books. So literally anything about evolution I was not allowed to read.
We made it, Seth. We made it through Catholic school and homeschooling. Yeah,
exactly.
We made it.
Catholics and Protestants united at last. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Thank you for bringing Dune, a great film that we were happy to rewatch and discuss. And folks, be looking out for that link to be supporting Aaron in his classroom. Yeah,
thanks for having me on. This is a lovely afternoon.
It's great.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, folks, that's all for now.